Hello, welcome back to episode 37 of Scuttlebutt, the Marine Corps Association podcast. I'm Nick, and I'm just going to quickly introduce our interview we did with Gunnery Sergeant retired Ray Branham, who works for Lockheed Martin. Ray Branham is, I believe, our first aviation guest, so we were excited to have him on board to talk a little bit about his experience with both the Harrier and with the Saberliner, as well as his transition into industry. So we were able to talk a lot about the resources that companies like Lockheed Martin have to be able to bring veterans into their fold. Raymond goes on and talks a lot about the education he did after he retired from the Marines, the resources he took advantage of. Here at Scuttlebutt, we're always trying to look at the way Marines can develop professionally and move forward in their lives, both within the Marine Corps and outside of the Marine Corps. It was a thrill having Ray and Lockheed Martin on with us. Before we jump into the interview, I'd like to chat a little bit about modern day Marine and how much fun we had meeting Marines, meeting industry, just having a good time. Thanks to everyone who stopped by our booth. It was great seeing you. Hopefully everyone who said they were going to listen to Scuttlebutt is listening to Scuttlebutt right now. Shout out. There was too many of you to shout out everyone by name, but it was great talking to everybody. Most of you probably remember William. He was really getting involved and engaged with everybody. So we were really excited to be there, and we look forward to meeting everybody again in the future. Hey, welcome back to Scuttlebutt. I'm Nick. I'm here with Vic, who's out in California.
Hello.
William, who's up in Northern Virginia.
Howdy.
And Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Branham, who I think is down in Florida.
No, I'm in Texas actually, but hello.
You're in Texas. All right, whatever. I saw. pretend I said Texas. I've got. So he's working with Lockheed Martin, and he's a quality manager for precision fire control systems.
Yes, sir. Specifically the ATACMS program.
ATACMS program. All right. Then we've also got from Lockheed Martin, Christina and Dana with us as well.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
So we got Gunnery Sergeant right here with us. And Christina, would you mind kind of chat with us a little bit about how you guys are supporting your vets, or reaching out, kind of appreciating the military a little bit?
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having us. For Military Appreciation Month, we really wanted to show our gratitude and support for those who serve and have served, their families. Lockheed Martin's military connections run deep. We have 1 in 5 employees have served that are on our team. And so we wanted to share Ray's story because he is just the perfect example. He really embodies the experience and perspective that we're always looking for at Lockheed Martin. And he really is, shows what we represent here. And so, Lockheed Martin is dedicated to supporting service members with programs that improve their lives and the lives of their families, enhance educational and training opportunities, and honor their selfless duty to our country, of course. We are always looking to support our military and our veterans. In 2001, Lockheed Martin contributed $8 million to ensure service members, veterans, and their families are prepared, well supported, and enabled to fully participate and thrive in society. And so when we were looking for an amazing story to tell, because we know that there's many of them within our company, for Military Appreciation Month, we came across Ray, and Ray is a Precision Fires Program quality manager. He works on ATACMS, and he joined the Armed Forces when he was 16 and spent 21 years in the Marine Corps. And what really struck us about his story when we were trying to find the perfect person to really get across our message of how we support our military and our veterans was he told us how when he was serving overseas, when he was deployed, he told us what it was like to witness Lockheed Martin products saving the lives of his fellow servicemen and women. And he says he saw firsthand how these products have to work, the first time when our armed forces need them the most. And that's, the foundation for his role in quality. And so Dana will be able to talk to you guys a little bit about the business resource groups that we have here for our military and our veterans, and the ones that Ray is a part of. Well, first, I think the best thing will be for Ray to tell you in his own words his story, his background, his service, his family's background, and how he ended up at Lockheed Martin. With that said, I turn you over to Ray.
Thank you, Christina. Appreciate the intro. And good afternoon, everyone. So as Christina mentioned, I joined the delayed entry program at 16. I was there at the Military Engines Processing Station on my 16th birthday. Right away.
So I came out of the recruiting. I was an OPSO up in Atlanta, and you were in Lakeland, Florida at this point?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so cool. So kind of talk us through that, because I think of all of our guests, you definitely have been the youngest you were the youngest who decided to make that, put your feet on those yellow footprints. So the recruiter clearly had to get the waiver from your family then, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And did he put screws on you, or were you just like, I'm in?
No, I'm in. And, my parents, were a little reluctant at first, but they know because of my grandfather's service to our country that I wanted to join as well. And, you being a former OPSO, very well, the information cards where you would mail in and request information. I have letters that came back to me that said, we appreciate your interest. However, since you're only 13 years of age now, you can't really join. So, I was ready to go. And it was something that I was really interested in doing, and something that the Marines really offered me is not only the tangible benefits, but as you well know, the intangible benefits. And that's what really pushed me to joining the Marine Corps, along with the many stories that my grandfather told me. He was in the Coast Guard during World War II, but obviously because it was World War II, they became a department of the Navy at the time, and all his stories and interactions with the Marines in Southern California area. Yeah,
that's fascinating. Like, to be that young. So, I mean, you were in the DEP for 2 years then?
Well, almost 1 year, because I actually went to Parris Island at the age of 17.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And 30 days into it, I turned 18.
That's crazy. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah. I didn't tell anyone that, by the way, that it was my birthday.
Oh, you didn't. I figured, you ended up in the pit. Like, hey, happy birthday, get the pit. So let's talk then a little bit about your lineage, because like you said, this wasn't the first time that your family has seen commitments to service, right?
That is correct. My other side of the family, having spent time with my grandparents, I heard countless stories. And my grandfather, my mother's side of the family, 9 generations. First family member arrived in Frederick in 1752, and he was from the Hessen Castle area of Germany. So if you're familiar with history a little bit, the British were heavily recruiting because of the strife between Britain and France from the Hessen area of Germany. And,
dude, that's how the Rubles came in as well. The Rubles came to this country via the Hessian mercenaries. So that's hilarious. That's awesome.
Yes, sir. And he was a cabinet woodworker. So when he was recruited, he worked on the wagons, essentially. He was originally recruited by the British, but when George Washington came to the area, we actually have a family book that outlines all this. So that's how I was able to find all this out. He shifted sides and joined the American forces to fight for America and its independence.
Wow.
And subsequently thereafter, just about every family member served in almost every major conflict that America had fought in.
That's so
really
cool.
Which specific conflicts?
All of them, William.
The French and Indian War, the 1812, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam. It's just about everything. I have a picture above my office door of my great grandfather when he served in the Army during World War I. The photo is a little bit after the war, a few years, but in 2 years it'll be 100 years old. So
That's incredible. So did growing up, was it sort of expected that you would serve, or was it sort of like this family lineage where like you felt like you needed to?
No, it wasn't expected. It was more that me personally, spending that much time with my grandfather as I did, it was something that I wanted to do because there were other parts of our families on both sides that had been with the railroad since its inception in this country and during the industrial age. But some of my uncles actually went to that route, but some of us went into the military.
And were there any other devil dogs, or are you the only?
I'm actually the only devil dog. That's it.
Nice. Hey,
Yep. It's I didn't know that you were an OPSO, but I also have a very cool picture. We have within Lockheed Martin, a human resource business partner, and by the name of Charles Tillaney. You may know him. He retired as a colonel. He was my commanding officer when I was on recruiting duty from 2000 to 2003. I actually have a photo in the very office that I left to go to boot camp in of me and him while I was on recruiting duty, promoting me to staff sergeant.
Wow, how cool. And then where were you at? What district?
I was in the 6th Marine Corps District down at RS Orlando, so I was actually very close to home.
I was RS Atlanta, but I was 03 to 05, so I was 6th District too, man. That was awesome.
Yeah.
All right, now as young Ray, teenage Ray is getting his feet wet in the Marine Corps. Did you have any idea what MOS you wanted to do, or you just kind of just along for the ride?
No, so I knew exactly what MOS I wanted to do, and I chose it with the hopes that I would be granted that upon successful completion of boot camp, and that was aviation maintenance. My grandfather was the corresponding rate in the Navy Coast Guard, which is the aviation machinist mate. He did the exact same thing on PBY amphibious aircraft. I knew exactly that's what I wanted to do. So when I did that, I was very happy that I was accepted into that MOS and was able to carry on that lineage. It's very him and I shared many stories because when I would go back home on leave, we'd go to the air show in Lakeland, Florida. It's called the Sun and Fun Flying. And he would talk about reciprocating engine aircraft, and I would talk about turbine engine aircraft the whole time. So I have a lot of fond memories of him doing things like that and just strictly talking aviation from a military perspective.
Military and like a gear nut perspective too, right? Like you can get weight in there.
Yes, exactly. And after he got out of the Coast Guard after World War II, he started his own machinist company in Lakeland, Florida, and he carried on that tradition, working in that industry as well.
So I got two aircraft here on my notes that you've worked on while you were in the Marines. The Av-8b Harrier, which is everybody knows what the Harrier is. Can you expound on that a little bit? What was like working on those pieces of machinery?
So it was very interesting and complicated at the same time. It's the only known aircraft that I know of that you have to take the wing off to get the engine removed. Made it very difficult to work on, but challenging at the same time. I was a jet engine mechanic on that MOS 6212, originally a 6015 before they transitioned us over to 6212. But that is the power line or power plants MOS for the Marine Corps in the Harrier squadrons, and we work on the removal and replacement of any jet engine components to include the fuel system, the oil system, and also take care of flight operations out on the flight line. So we would launch and recover aircraft when they come back from flight.
All right, and so you had to take those skills to the planes, or when the planes needed new engines, they came to you?
Well, we had scheduled and unscheduled maintenance at the organizational level in the Marine Corps. So if there was a discrepancy when the pilot came back from flight, we would, and it involved our particular skill set, we would get involved in repair it. But if there was a scheduled maintenance, like an engine was due to be removed, we would remove the engines or other components that come up for removal.
The F-35 replaced the Harrier, and the first squadrons are now standing up of the F-35. Is it just coincidental that you're a Harrier powertrain mechanic and now you're working at Lockheed Martin, who's fielding the F-35?
Well, it was very coincidental. When I first retired, I tried to get on with the aeronautics division or business area of our company, but it was very rough time in the job market, and I wasn't able to make that transition to support the F-35 because that was my ultimate goal. I had a lot of fellow Marines that had retired and worked at Lockheed Martin in aeronautics as well, but it didn't work out. And lo and behold, I'm 5 years later after I retired. I got a job at Lockheed Martin in 2017, but I'm part of the Missiles and Fire Control Division now. So actually, it's almost like from a Marine Corps perspective, I went from power plants to ordnance. So now I'm working on missiles. So I get a lot of grief from my ordnance friends.
Nice. And then, so the other airframe that Nick had alluded to is a CT-39G Sabreliner. So how is it as a maintainer, did you end up as a crew chief of the Sabreliner?
So on my second enlistment, I got orders to go to MCAS El Toro before it shut down, before the base realignment and closure. And when I got there, I was assigned to the visiting aircraft line. And because of it being 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing headquarters at the time, they had transient aircraft that were coming in, all different airframes and types. So they needed someone with my skill set up there. So I went there as a corporal, got promoted to sergeant after I made the transition. And I was approached by the OPSO that was in charge of S3 for ComCab West, and they told us that, hey, we need a crew chief for the Sabreliner. A lot of the guys that were in weather or flight ops, part of the side of the house, it was station operations and maintenance squadron, had no aviation background, but that specific aircraft required the crew chiefs to go to flight safety and take the pilot initial course. So they were spending money to send folks up there that couldn't pass it because of no aviation background. So they took a chance on me, sent me there, and I passed. And I became the crew chief for that Sabreliner and carried on with that job from 96 to 2000.
So you
That's
picked up
awesome.
the Saberliner in the 90s, and it's already, what is it, like it's already a 30-year-old aircraft by that point, right? Like,
Yes, sir. So very funny story. The first passenger I ever picked up in 96 was Brigadier General Richard at the time at 29 Palms. And I step off the aircraft and I say, "Good afternoon, sir." And he goes, "Holy smokes, you guys couldn't bring anything newer?" I remember riding on one of these when I was an aide to a general in Vietnam.
Now, yeah, so I think for all of our listeners who aren't aware, could you explain what the Sabreliner is for those who aren't necessarily up on it?
Sure. We had the ability to carry 6 passengers on that aircraft with the passengers' luggage, but it's a VIP aircraft. We would get tasking from Air Mobility Command in the Air Force because it was an asset that could be used multi armed forces or even dignitaries from Congress or the Senate. We could pick up those VIPs and transport them from point A to point B. A lot of times, us being in El Toro, we would pick up people locally in the Southern California area or on the West Coast and transport them to Washington, D.C. And then we would fly back empty unless we had another mission to bring someone back from the East Coast to the West Coast.
That's so cool. And I'm embarrassed to have to ask this about, what does a crew chief on a military private jet do? Having been that I actually rode on one when I was in Afghanistan, I had to go to some meeting with our RCT commander. And I thought when we went down to the ATAC that we were just going to be getting on whatever MV-22 or CH-53 or whatever was leaving out at the time. And here comes this private jet. Comes to pick us up. I was like, oh, dang, I got the bling now. I'm rolling with, the OGs. And then I fell asleep. Like, as soon as we were wheels up, and I was out until we were wheels down, it's like this like time warp. And so I have no idea what actually happens on these things. That happened on the way back as well. So could you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be the crew chief of a military private jet?
Sure. So starting out, I would inspect the aircraft before takeoff and before passengers arrived. I would also work with the pilots to get the flight plan submitted. And then once we were on the aircraft and the passengers were there, we would conduct a safety brief, much just like a commercial aircraft. And then after that, we did have coffee aboard. If anybody wanted coffee, that would be served. But then after that, I sat in between the pilot and co-pilot. We would monitor communications. I would also input waypoints into the flight management system prior to takeoff. I would also calculate center of gravity of the aircraft and the VR and V1 speeds for the pilots based on our CG and how much weight we were carrying, temperature of the day, barometric pressure, and things of that nature.
Wow, that sounds really involved. I mean,
it is.
And essentially, this was OJT for you.
It was.
That's crazy.
Say probably one of the most influential passengers that I ever picked up on that aircraft. We went to the outer outskirts of Atlanta, and we picked up, and you may know this person, General Ray Davis. He was a commandant from 71 to 72. And it was just, he was going, I think it was 97 or 98, if I remember correctly, but he was donating a Korean War memorial in California because he served in the Korean War, obviously. And it was just him and I in the back of the aircraft the whole way there, and endless stories and utmost respect for that, for General Ray Davis. Kind of a funny story. We were about to land and he said, "Sergeant, do you mind if I get into my bag before we land?" I'm like, "Sure, no problem." He was 82 at the time. So I walked with him, and he's reaching into his bag and he's pulling something out. He says, "Can you hold this for me?" And I'm like, "Sure." And the next thing I know, I look down and I'm holding the Medal of Honor. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of one of those moments. And along with that and all the stories, it was just an incredible experience.
Oh, sounds like it.
So aside from commandants and other generals, any other notable, like, odd VIPs that you took on board?
The second in charge of the Navy, it was one of the admirals. I can't remember at the time, but I do remember we were flying over Nashville when downtown Nashville got hit by a tornado. And we had a heavy wind downforce push us down about 2,000 feet at the blink of an eye. And I looked back at the passengers, and his eyes and all of his aides, their eyes were probably about as big around as silver dollars because they were wondering what was going on. So,
because they're on a 35-year-old airplane falling towards the earth. Yeah.
Yes.
So, hey, if the plane is being used by multiple services, and you go, like, you're scheduled to pick one up that was just used, or use one, I guess, not pick one up, use one that was just being used by the Air Force. Is there a lot of turnover there? Or?
Well, so it would still be Marine pilots and myself or one of my fellow crew chiefs that would still fly with the aircraft. So we would get tasking, and I remember one other notable one. We flew up to Washington State. I forgot the Army base that's next to McCord, but we picked up a general from that base and flew into Washington, D.C. So it just really depends from the operations department in the squadron that I was in, where their mission assignments came from.
All right. And just not to change gears too much, but I do want to mention right now that we're kind of it's been a few days, but we just had the 110th anniversary of aviation in the Marine Corps, USMC Aviation. And I see it's not a Marine Corps jet behind you there. Our listeners can't see it, but you have some kind of VTOL thing from the early space age. Looks like it's an Air Force experiment.
In the 50s. It is an XFV1, and another part of my family history. A couple of my great uncles worked for Lockheed in the 50s before it was Lockheed Martin, and they were electrical engineers, and they supported the development of that aircraft. There were only two ever built. It was requested by the Navy. It's oddly enough, it's one of the first V-stall aircraft that ever existed, because it launches vertically like that. And it's actually that aircraft, which that's an original photo from the only one that flew. That aircraft is now on static display at the Lakeland, Florida airport there, where they conduct that Sun and Fun fly-in air show. So
you like tagged out with it, right? So you left Lakeland, it went in.
Yes, sir.
So you big into aviation history? That something you like to look into a lot?
I dabble in it a little bit. I'm not deeply intimate with it.
Okay, I was gonna just kind of ask what your favorite historical, like pre you joining the Corps aircraft was.
I would have to say the F4U Corsair.
All right. I think a lot of people say the F4U Corsair. If you held a poll of Marines, it would be that, or it would be the crap. I just left my mind.
The F4.
It would be the Corsair. Yeah, they like the F4 too. Oh, the.
No worries. Just to save you a bit, Nick. So Ray, you served in the Marine Corps for about 21 years, correct?
Yes.
Do you mind going into some detail about like some notable tours?
Hey, future Nick here. Just want to clarify a little bit about my brain fart. I was referring to a poll that we conducted in November of 2018. November is Aviation History Month, wherein we asked our followers what the most iconic Marine Corps aircraft was, both fixed and rotary. And the number one by far was the F4U Corsair. The second place, pretty far ahead of third place, was the A4 Skyhawk. And then a little bit behind that, we had the Intruder, the A6. We had the Frog, the CH-46. We had the Phantom II, the F4. And we also had the Osprey and the Hornet getting some votes.
Or overseas tours you've done?
Sure. So my first unit that I was signed to in the Fleet Marine Corps Force was VMA 311 Mag 13, the Tomcats. We did do a lot of deployments when I first joined. We did a lot of stateside training exercises. We did one unit deployment program to exercise, and we were stationed with Mag 12 in Iwakuni. While we were in Iwakuni, we did probably about 4 to 5 weeks down in Okinawa with our Dash B detachment down in Okinawa that was assigned to the Marine Expeditionary Unit there. I think it was 31st MEU at the time. From there, we actually got to spend 2 weeks in Darwin, Australia in 1994. That was a interesting experience. Got to see some of Australia the first time firsthand, and some interesting stuff down there, to say the least. After that, I was in El Toro. I didn't deploy because I was supporting that aircraft that we talked about earlier, the Saberliner. Went to recruiting duty right after that from 2000, 2003, and then came back and did multiple tours in Iraq with VMA 211 Mag 13 in Yuma, Marine Corps Air Station, Yuma, Arizona. Both 311 and 211 were in Yuma, Arizona. Multiple tours to Iraq there, supported Operation Steel Curtain, and a few others.
Where were you out of? Were you guys out of TQ or Al Assad?
Al Assad.
Okay.
Southeast end of the airfield.
Yeah, we only Al Assad thing that I remember, because we were out. I was out in Abu Hayat, which is just south of Haditha Dam, and then I was there for the invasion. And so Al Assad didn't even exist at the time. Well, it existed, but it was the Iraqi Air Force. Anyhow, when you would go in, I think it was the East Gate. They had those complacency kills signs.
Yes.
And some genius added an S, so it said complacency skills. As you were going back in. Anyways, I think that memory is going to stay with me till I die, because that was hilarious.
definitely a lot of interesting times there, with dwell time being so short. I'm sure you experienced that as well. There 7 months, home for 6 months, and back 7 months again. So,
Yeah, the craziest thing I remember was the cans.
Mhm.
So I didn't see those until we were rotating back, doing our sort of decompression, like waiting for our flight to land. But yeah, the air conditioned cans. I was like, holy jeez, man, this is a game changer.
Yeah, it was definitely better than a GP tent, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
It but I did have a memorable experience, probably the first time I was there, and that this is how it kind of ties to Lockheed Martin and what really drove me to Lockheed Martin, and that's I was running maintenance control for the squadron at the time, and we got a call, hey, we've got an urgent sortie, which is a mission for aircraft that we have to go support, and there was a major at the time that was killed in action, that was supporting one of the MU. He was attached to the MU, but he was out supporting ground combat operations, and he was killed in action. There were about 7 or 8 insurgents that ran into a concrete reinforced building, and we were called in to neutralize the threat with 8 aircraft. We were able to accomplish that mission, and then I would say probably about 2 or 3 weeks later, as you know, many infantrymen would take their R&R at Al Assad, and I was at the exchange on the north side, and I was in a flight suit, and he walked up to me and asked me if I was a pilot, and I said no, I'm an aircraft maintainer, and he said which squadron, and I said VMA 211, and our call sign was Wake. He said I was the person that called in for direct air support after the major was killed, and I was danger close when I called in that air support. And every time we call Wake, you guys are always there, and I just want to say thank you. And from that moment on, that's what really resonated with me about once I'm retired, I want to continue to carry on that service and support aerospace and defense products, especially from a quality perspective, because as Christina said and Dana said, they've got to work right the first time and every time. So
Yeah, absolutely. What was it like then having multiple tours? I guess, did you sort of see the progress where a lot of those, like the amount of ticks that you guys had to respond to was dropping? Or was it just always constant, like go, go, go? And the progress was, looking at the blades of grass across the field sort of thing.
yeah, I would say the latter, because I was there. My multiple tours were between the '04, '08 timeframe,
Okay.
and it was pretty heavy.
Yeah. Yeah. Al Saha one didn't happen until I think latter part of '06 or '07.
Yes,
And that was the Great Sunni Awakening. And then how about retirement then? So we shift gears a little bit. You talked about you had originally tried to come on board with Lockheed Martin to help out with the F-35. And then 5 years later, you're now with ATACMS. What was transition like for you?
So it was pretty tough. Like I said, the job market was pretty tight in 2011. It took me about 6 months to find a job, and when I finally found that job, it was with another aerospace defense company, not Lockheed Martin. But I took that job, but it was in quality as well. And then when I did that, at first it was tough because here I am, a gunnery sergeant in charge of a division within the squadron of maintainers, especially because my last squadron was VMAT 203, which is a training squadron. So I had about 100 Marines and 30 plus aircraft, a lot of responsibility. And now I'm going to a little piece of the pie. So it was tough at first, but then I realized that we were all equal partners in it, and that it was important for me to do my job and handle my piece of the pie. And once I did that, I would say I pretty much slid right into my responsibilities.
And was that something that you had picked up from like Tap and Tamp? Or was that another sort of like being the crew chief of the Saberliner? Like that's sort of an OJT sort of thing.
it was kind of an OJT sort of thing. You know, a lot of times I would go to my manager and I would say, "Hey, how do you feel about this?" And not being very specific, but you know, trying to get some feedback from him. And he goes, "Well, where do you think you would find the answer for that?" And that kind of clicked with me right away because he didn't want to tell me the answer. He wanted me to find it on my own. You know, teach me how to fish, kind of thing. And I was very grateful for that. He was in the Navy, so he understood the importance of being able to do that.
So, do you mind going into detail, I guess, how you were able to transition from the Marine Corps into civilian life in Lockheed Martin?
Sure. So it was, like I said, it was a little tough at first, but I made some adjustments. I went out and educated myself. I finished my bachelor's degree in my last, I want to say I started in 05 and graduated in 09. So even in the middle of all those tours in Iraq, I was able to complete my bachelor's degree in aviation management. When I got out into the aerospace defense industry, I realized I lacked a lot of business acumen and the skills associated with that. So I used my GI Bill to go off and get an MBA so I could kind of hone my skills from a technical perspective and a business perspective. And then I also went out and got a master's of science in aeronautics. So that way, I was, I guess you could say, a dual threat from an education perspective. And, you know, that really helped bridge that gap. It took me about 5 or 4 years after I retired to accomplish both of those. But when I did, it helped me accelerate my career faster. And Lockheed Martin was very supportive of that and allowing me to do that in my free time. And they absolutely encourage that within the company as well.
That's awesome. What would you recommend for veterans who are leaving the service in order to transition? Like, what advice would you give?
I would say that it's important if they have signed up for the GI Bill, and I remember my drill instructors, they almost made all of us do it. So I'm pretty sure every Marines has it. So it's important to continue that education. And that was ingrained with me with my grandfather in the service that he did. He said, take advantage of everything that you can when it comes to education and teach yourself. He was a self-taught man on many different skills, and it ultimately, you know, made him successful throughout his life. So with that solid foundation, it helped me to be successful. And then, so I would recommend to everyone that's leaving the service, you know, get that education because it's going to help push you over the hump and make that transition easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many opportunities between, you know, TA tuitions assistance for those Marines who still have enough on their contract. And then obviously there's MESEP, which I wish I had known about MESEP. I probably wouldn't have gone right into college out of high school. It's such an amazing program. Do you feel like when you were in that those sorts of opportunities were very well known, or did you really feel like there was a lot of personal initiative that you had to go out and seek that kind of information?
So I would say my first 10 years, you would have to go out and seek that information. And then coming off recruiting duty really helped open my eyes to it. And looking back, oddly enough, one of our other passengers on that Saberliner aircraft was General Christmas at the time.
Nice.
And him and his aide were both telling me while we were on an aircraft flight one time that I should apply for a program. And this is before recruiting duty. And I had no clue what they were talking about. And I never pursued it. And I look back on that day sometimes and I wonder if they were trying to poke me along and tell me to do that. And
yeah, that's one of the things I definitely found. I mean, between ECP, MCP, and MESEP, that the big differentiator was just those who were willing to apply. And I think now there's so many universities that have MESEP programs that you really can pretty much go where you want to go. Obviously, you've got to meet all of the entry requirements and stuff, but if you can get a decent score on some of those standardized tests, there's not really many universities that are going to turn down government money.
Yes.
They don't have to worry about you making tuition, and that's the thing. Like, they want you to show up.
Exactly. And I'm still doing that to this day. I'm working on my doctorate of business administration, focusing on strategy for my dissertation. I've got about a year left, so I'm still continuing that torch and carrying the education piece of it. And I probably will until I retire from Lockheed Martin before I become a full-time professor. But I'm going to stay. My plan is to stay relevant in industry until I'm of retirement age, and then go out and possibly pick up the teaching gig as a professor.
That's cool. And so, being at Lockheed Martin, and I would assume company that you worked for before Lockheed Martin, but there's so many veterans that you work with, or at least that are all, that are part of the Lockheed Martin team. Do you work directly with a lot of veterans also?
I do. Matter of fact, my direct manager is a former Marine. He worked on F-4 Phantoms, so common bond there during the 70s and 80s. The matter of fact, the first gentleman that hired me in to Lockheed Martin was a Marine as well, a C-130 mechanic. And so, my old commanding officer from RS Orlando is actually a human resources business partner in the Virginia area on the East Coast, Colonel Charles Delaney. He's supporting the hiring of veterans out there. So going back to those business resource groups that we talked about earlier, I do have a service-connected disability, although it's not combat related. I kind of couple that business resource group that I'm involved in, which is ABLES and Allies, folks with disabilities, and then the MilVet side. So I try to, not only do I work with veterans a lot, but I also support hiring as well of military veterans, and I'm a direct hiring manager. So I support military veterans being hired, and specifically I'm a huge proponent of disabled veterans being hired into the workforce.
That's awesome. What a great cause. And then, so are you, is that just for the Texas area, or is that nationwide?
So it could be nationwide because I do have supplier quality field engineers that report to me that are regionally throughout the United States. So it could be that support our program, and it could be anywhere in the United States.
Awesome. And then, so I guess for any of our listeners who are interested, like, how would someone reach out and get hold of you?
So I am on LinkedIn. I could be looked up there and be contacted, and I could point them into the to the appropriate resources where they could apply.
And Dana, do you want to talk about some of the business resource groups that Ray is in, kind of those kinds of groups that we have at Lockheed?
Sure. So Ray talked about our MilVets group. He also mentioned our Able and Allies group. So that is one of several different groups of diversity dimensions. We have ethnicity, gender identity, expression, generations, and race. We have different groups all related to those items. And so that's just part of our company's way of wanting to make sure that everyone feels welcomed and understood, that they can bring their full, authentic selves to work, and that they're provided with the necessary tools for their professional and personal development and success. And a lot of these groups are doing service-oriented activities as well related to these items. So Ray's mentioned that there's some service groups there, some service projects. I know that recently we had one of our MilVets members recognized by the Orlando Business Journal as a veteran of influence, doing a lot of great work in the Orlando community where we have Lockheed Martin location there. And so that's just one of the many things that they're doing across all of our Lockheed Martin locations across the United States. Just to give you a little bit more background on MilVets and Able and Allies. So Able and Allies is for recognizing any of our employees or the allies that have a disability or different abilities. And then if you are an ally with that, you can join. If you maybe have like a family member who identifies with that. Same thing for MilVets. So we have family members of MilVets, military veterans, who are part of that group, as well as veterans. So a lot of different opportunities there for employees.
Does anybody else have anything they want to throw on the fire here?
I think we're good to cover. I think we'd like to do the ceremonious last question.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have this pseudo tradition. We ask our guests their favorite day in the Marine Corps. So, Ray, like, what's your best day in the Marine Corps, man?
So it was 1994, and probably one of the most down to earth Marine Corps birthdays we ever had. We were coming back from that unit deployment program exercise that I talked about after being 6 months abroad. We were in the theater on November 10th, enjoying the Marine Corps birthday, going through customs and watching Forrest Gump as it was released on the movie theater. So it was a great time with friends and fellow Marines. And to me, it was just a unique celebration. It's nothing like anything else you could have seen. But a close second is that moment when that Marine came up to me and thanked me for providing support. That resonates with me just about every day and every time I do my job.
That's awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, it was been awesome having you on, Ray. Christina, Dan, it's nice meeting you guys too.
Hey, can I add one more thing, Nick? I
Yes,
know that
you can.
you guys were talking about jobs and stuff, and so I just kind of want to throw that like resource out there. If you guys can throw this in somewhere, but at the end of the day, if you want to make a difference working on cutting edge technologies that address the world's most complex challenges, then you want to be working with Lockheed Martin. So we really want to attract, develop, and retain the best of the best talent to develop the breakthrough solutions that will shape the future. And we know that people with military backgrounds have the perspectives and the experience that we're always going to be looking for. So if you're looking to pursue a career at Lockheed Martin, or you're interested in learning more about the types of jobs that we have here, you can just visit lockheedmartinjobs.com.
All right. And of course, any friend of Marines is a friend of ours. So check that out, everybody, if you're looking for work. And we'll catch everybody on the flip.
Yep, it was
Thank
a pleasure.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. I hope everybody enjoyed that awesome conversation we had with Ray. You can find the resources linked below. And if you are listening in your car and you want to find those resources, we have them linked at mca-marines.org/scuttlebutt within episode 37. This was our most involved conversation. We had people everywhere, all over the country, different time zones, different internet connections, different microphones. So thanks for bearing with us throughout the whole thing. Sorry if it didn't match our normal audio quality, but I think that the content speaks for itself. But that might just be me being a little biased. It is Scuttlebutt after all. Of course, we need to do our normal disclaimers here. The opinions on Scuttlebutt are just that. They are opinions. They do not reflect that of the Marine Corps Association, the Marine Corps, or Lockheed Martin. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.